Change. Vocabulary instruction through critical thinking. Ten. For 2 decades, 10% has been my focus. 10%, roughly 10% of students in K-12 education in the United States are identified with some type of learning difference. As a speech, language, and literacy expert, my focus has been this 10%. I've been there to help them. I've stayed current in the latest research and instruction methods so that I could be at the top of my game. And I've shared everything I've learned with other educators. Then, one student completely changed my perspective. She changed the course of my life, and she sparked a change in education called Semantic Reasoning. This student, an 8th grade girl named Penina, broadened my perspective. While I worked with her, it led me to an understanding that while I had been focusing on the 10%, it's actually 65%, and that should shock us. 65% of students in this country struggle with vocabulary knowledge and reading comprehension. Along this 6-year journey that I've been on with my educational technology partner, Dina Seifert, we have learned a lot. And researchers have actually helped us to see that while we were focused on that 10%, it's actually almost all students who could benefit from this change that Penina inspired. Words are the building blocks of oral and written language, and by extension, all learning. We have learned a lot over the last 20 years about best practice vocabulary instruction. Unfortunately, it's not always playing out in the classroom, and the reason is it is time-consuming. Teachers are encouraged to write student-friendly definitions and have their students act words out and do all kinds of activities where they're connecting the new words they're learning with the words they already have in a variety of ways. It's time-consuming, and it uses a lot of language. In a pinch, many of us fall back on an old standby, the flashcard. Prudent, adjective. Wise or judicious in practical affairs. Sagacious, discreet or circumspect. Sober. This is an actual example of a word that one of my 6th grade students needed to learn. Can you guess what he told me this word meant, prudent, after learning this word? If you guessed not drunk, bingo. True. Now just imagine the impact that this vocabulary-dense, language-laden method has when students need to know 50,000 words by 12th grade. 65% of students are already showing us that written language is not their ideal approach. The problem is real, and it's huge. Many educators are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. This is a learning construct that was introduced in 1956. The very basic premise is that higher level learning, such as critical thinking, happens only after students get through that lower level learning where they've done a lot of memorizing, such as rote memorization type of activities. We are in a season of change in education, with Bloom's taxonomy getting a lot of flipping of late, with project-based learning and flipped classrooms, reversing the emphasis of classroom instruction, that classroom time, to higher level learning. rather than lower level learning such as rote memorization. The epiphany that I had while working with Penina is similar. I had been sharing my understanding of words using language, sharing definitions with my students. What would happen if we invited students into the process of deeply learning nuanced word meanings through critical thinking, and doing so in the visual domain to fully get why, and we would be using language to support that visual. To fully get why semantic reasoning works, it's helpful to think about how typical vocabulary development works. So babies, in their environment, they tend to learn the words for the people and the concrete items that are in their environment, such as doggy. This baby, on a subconscious level, is building the neural network on which all future vocabulary knowledge will rest. It's almost like the baby is thinking on a subconscious level, doggy, she's furry, she has 4 legs, she has a tail, she has a pointy face, doggy. Doggy? This process of word learning is called overgeneralization. This is where the caregiver steps in and explains the difference between cows and dogs, explains how they both fit into the category of animals, maybe even explains that the concept of subcategories, such as farm animals and pets. This is the foundation for semantics, or word relationships. And hopefully, this is formed well before students enter school. We don't tend to use a lot of sophisticated language, vocabulary, when we're speaking orally, but authors do. As students move through those early elementary years, hopefully, they learn how to read. And then, upper elementary through high school, it's a lot of reading in order to learn. Every word encounter a student has with a particular word gives them the opportunity to encounter that word in a variety of different contexts. And this is a cumulative effect. The result is depth of word knowledge and highly connected word networks. It is the avid readers who are the ones with fantastic vocabularies. So, what happens when students are not avidly reading? There are many, many ways that this typical vocabulary learning process can be derailed. My training and my tendency encouraged a lot of explaining and informing and guiding that thinking process through art and graphic organizers and acting things out, yes, but mostly it was from a lot of talking and written language. Since Penina was not an avid reader, she had not encountered those great nuanced words. After a particularly harrowing session with her, where I deeply taught her the meaning of the word prominent, a week later, she informed me emphatically that prominent means short. Rarely speechless, I rushed to my office. I pulled out her student file, and on a hope and a prayer, I searched for something, anything, that would give me a clue how I could reach this student. How had I forgotten this? Here was a student who had superior, genius-level nonverbal learning skills, and her verbal skills significantly lower. My aha moment was that I had been using language to teach language to a student whose primary struggle was language. Because Penina struggled to read, she hadn't been encountering those great words like prudent and prominent. And then all the flashcards she was doing in class, those weren't helping. And then there I was with all my language. What about the idea of providing her with the equivalent of multiple years of word encounters, but doing so in a condensed, visual way? I found pictorial representations of the word prominent, put them on a page with just the word prominent at the top. I was prepared with language as a support if needed. I had captions in mind for these images. But Penina took a look at this and in 6 seconds flat informed me, oh, prominent means to stand out in some way. I was floored. And then she was able to give me 2 additional examples. Learning had occurred. A few months later, after this experience with Penina, I said it's been a wild ride, we met with several very prominent researchers who encouraged Dina and me to get out of our comfort zones and share what had not as of yet been codified as a process. We were delighted to share semantic reasoning on a national level. We have been sharing with educators about this construct and teaching them how to make their own semantic reasoning lessons, regardless of the class they're teaching. Along the way, we authored the only test of semantic reasoning, and we developed a K-12 web-based technology tool called Infercabulary that improves vocabulary and critical thinking. So this activity asks students to find the common thread among the images using their critical thinking skills, and then choose which one word goes with all 4 images. It's prominent. In 2015, Dr. Michael Kennedy at the University of Virginia conducted a small study. What he found was students scored far higher the weeks they learned words using semantic reasoning than they did when they used business as usual instruction. And the reason why was that students were far better able to apply their newly gained knowledge of those words to new contexts. Let him who would move the world first move himself. I had been doing everything right as an instructor, but it wasn't until I sought to really understand that one student that a new approach came to light that is now helping so many other learners. As educators, we are passionate about helping students learn. Regardless of our backgrounds and our education, we need to consider embracing change when it's good. I would encourage you to try and use semantic reasoning in your classrooms. And I would encourage you to keep your eyes and your ears open for that one student who might be the muse for the next change in education. Thank you so much.